start at 1931. So, Christian, you are good to do your magic. And I would just let everyone know this time that we are streaming both on Discord and on YouTube as well. And we are also recording the session just if anyone wants to catch up afterwards. So, but please don't feel pressured. Like if you want to speak out or say anything, please do. Don't feel the weight of the stream bearing down on you. Just please unmute and say something if you're getting stuck behind or something else, because tonight's session we're going to do some actual workshopping kind of it's not going to be like interactive, like, you know, I'm going to be asking you questions, but more like I'm going to do a walkthrough of using Obsidian, and I'd really like that that you guys are shouting out if you've got any issues or anything that we need to quickly work through together. So basically, guys, welcome to today's session. Last session was actually really way fun and went on for way too long and went really insanely deep. And I got a little bit carried away and forgot that we were actually doing meant to be doing an introduction to CTI. So this time I'm going to try and go a little bit less deep, but make sure that you guys are sticking with it and actually end up with a nice end product at the end. And the end product at the end will be hopefully some sort of that you'd have learned a new technique to gathering threat intelligence if you want to start gathering it, and you also know how the tool Obsidian works and how interesting it can actually be to use this tool to do your CTI stuff. So let's dive in, shall we? Now, for those of you that weren't at the last session, if I just, crap, I'm still here, good. There. This is me. I didn't actually introduce myself last time, I don't think, and I didn't really introduce Computech, so I'll make sure I just very briefly touch on these things. As you can hear, I am British, and maybe some of you do know me. I can see some names that I know from the list. I've been living in Denmark now for coming up to 7 years or so, I think. I work at Computech, where I'm a senior advisor. I do a lot of work in CTI, and I'll come into that in a second. I really love open source stuff, not just the actual open source tooling, but the whole mindset around it. You know, this whole like desire to share things and give back and everything that's kind of inspired by the open source culture. I'm just going to open my window here because it's actually quite warm. It's something that I really love and really would like to kind of bring open source into everything that I'm doing. So it's also something that I'm bringing quite heavily into Computech, trying to be far more open about what we're doing. And you'll see a bit later in this talk some of the stuff where we look at Wizard Spider, where we've also released some stuff recently that I really want that to be kind of, I want CTI to be far more open source and far more about sharing. I was also a blogger at the time that I made this presentation, but actually I'm not doing that very much more for security distractions. There's a funny story there. We don't need to go into that right now. But I also love teaching and I love mentoring, and that's what we're doing here today. A little bit of teaching, and I do quite a lot of mentoring as well whenever I can. So that's me. My life in CTI and in the cyber world. Back in 2017, I got into MISP, and if anyone has played around with MISP, that's something that maybe we will look at in the future. And in these lesson series, we'll look at MISP and how it can be used. We'll also at some point look at IOCs and threat feeds and automation. But back in 2018, I was kind of new to this whole world of CTI as well, and I thought that this was what CTI was all about. So all about, getting indicators of compromise and sharing them and putting them into your tools. I thought that was okay. This is CTI. I can CTI now, right? I can do CTI just because I can take this IP address and I can have it blocked. And there was a whole world of hurt out there because maybe a number of you guys have also experienced this, where something happens, an attack on Bauhaus as an example, and then all of a sudden everyone's sharing indicators around the attack and saying, oh, we've got to we've got to block these, otherwise we're going to be under attack. And the more, the naive security consultants there take those at face value, and then they try and figure out how the hell do we block them and everything else. The ones that have been doing it a little bit longer and have done more in CTI start to question them and actually understand, okay, hang on, this hash value for this very specific piece of malware right here, is this something that we should actually be blocking? Should we be spending time blocking that, or should we actually be focusing more on the actual techniques? And so it took quite a long time before I kind of came away from that mindset. And I met this guy, and this guy is Jake Williams. And Jake Williams is SANS, or was a SANS instructor, but he was also a member of the TEO team at the NSA. And this is something that he hasn't necessarily talked about himself, but this is something that has been published in the press. The shadow brokers, they actually outed him as a member of the TEO. But he was, anyway, that group was a really, really, really interesting group at the NSA. But he taught me a lot about CTI and went on this SANS 4578 course, which if anyone is interested into getting into CTI and going deeper down there, that's actually a really interesting course to get onto. I think it also kind of teaches a lot of the softer side of cybersecurity, more of the management kind of stuff about how to actually talk to management about cybersecurity. That's a lot of what cyber threat intelligence is actually about. Anyway, then in 2020, I became a member of the Threat Intelligence Committee at the Nordic Financial Cert, which was basically a group of people that were nominated to be part of a wider committee that kind of shared threat intelligence across the Nordic financial community. And in there, I learned quite a lot about threat intelligence, and a lot more than just being about IOCs, but also understanding how can we, where we were when I was at JN Data at this point, how can we share threat intelligence with places like Danske Bank and know that they're able to operationalize it? And how are we able to operationalize what they're giving us? And that's some of what we're going to look at tonight in this mini workshop, where we're going to look at how can we take some of this intelligence that's going on and learn some stuff about it, and then leverage it and turn it into something where we can learn from multiple attacks, and what can we see between the two attacks that overlaps, and then how can we then use that next. Yeah, and in 2020 as well, I actually picked up this book, and I would highly recommend if anyone's interested in, especially the last lecture that I gave, where we looked at the deep dive. It was supposed to be a shallow dive, but the deep dive into CTI, I'd highly recommend this book. It's really, really valuable, and it's like my Bible. My literally, I read it every night before I go to sleep. No, I don't, but I mean, it's pretty close to that. Yeah, and then in 2021, I moved to Computech. And my life at Computech, I do quite a lot of different things. A lot of them are CTI driven. We're not really going to spend very much time on this slide. This was just one that I threw in there because it was already part of the slide deck. So we'll dive out of this one. But basically everything that I do at Computech, I want to also be CTI driven. And that's kind of the approach that I'm bringing into everything that I do. So we've already done this about what is CTI. So this is only going to be a very, very, very short refresher for those of you that have already been through this as of last week's ones. But this is a very quick refresher. And this is talking about the differences between threat data and threat intelligence. So we're not going to spend very long in here. We're just going to go through it very quickly, and then we'll move on to Obsidian. So the first thing we do when we look at threat intelligence is we actually need to look at something around data, right? Remember, we need to go back through. We need to look at threat data first. We need to define what a threat is, and then we also need to then look at, okay, what's data, and then how do we apply intelligence? So threat data, as I just talked about, these things around like, the early stages of threat intelligence, indicators, data about threats that others have seen. So what do I mean when I say this? So this is basically like, if you receive indicators of compromise, let's say we look at that, the cyber attack that came out, I think wasn't it today, the ransomware against the water treatment plant in Kalundborg, I think it was today. If we look at that attack, if we were to get some indicators from that, some IP addresses maybe, or something else like that, that would be data about threats that others have seen. There is a little bit of context in the sense that we know that it hit a water treatment plant, but we don't know very much more about it, right, at that point. If it was just a blank IP address, we wouldn't know so much. Was it the IP address of the command and control server? Was it the IP address of the initial payload hosting domain? You know, what was this IP? So it's basically data about threats that others have seen, but without that additional context, so we can actually turn it into intelligence. So in order to turn it into intelligence, I guess hopefully if some of you were here on the last week's one, you'll know that we basically have to have some questions that we want to answer about it to kind of bring our context into this. So that could be things like, you know, how is this IP address? How is it important? How can we use it once we've got it? And if we just get a long list of IP addresses, should we be blocking it? What, you know, why is this useful? These are all great questions to ask of the data that we get in terms of also being able to turn it into intelligence. Now, this diagram was on the last week's slides, but I'm just going to make sure that everyone is back up to speed on this very, very quickly. And we look at this IP address, right? So let's say this IP address is from that attack in the Cannonball water treatment plant from today. I think it was that. This IP address, is this threat intelligence? So if we actually look and ask these questions of it, is this something that we should do something about? We can't derive enough to make sure to actually ask ourselves, is this actually a threat to us, right? So this IP address doesn't really tell us very much. We just, you know, okay, can we tell that there was intent from this IP address? No. Can we tell what capabilities there were? No, it doesn't tell us that they were using Cobalt Strike. It doesn't tell us that they were using spear phishing. It doesn't tell us anything like that. The opportunity, nope, doesn't tell us that they used social engineering. They were able to compromise a user by asking them to click on something. Doesn't tell us that they found an open window at the water treatment plant and just climbed in and inserted a USB into the network. Doesn't tell us anything like that. So in order for us to actually turn this into intelligence and know that we can actually do something with it, we need to add some more context in, right? We need to add something that gives us some, you know, okay, we can actually do something with this. And don't worry, guys, like I'm not just going over last week's stuff just because I don't have anything else to talk about. It's just important that we crack this so that we then, when we move into doing the Obsidian stuff, we know why we're adding all the different metadata that we add to the data that we're going to be working with. So when we add threat intelligence into the mix, again, to go back over this very, very quickly, for threat intelligence to be valuable, it needs to have context. It also needs to be relevant. Again, it needs to answer those questions. How can we use it? And why is this important to us as an organization? Something simple like taking the IP address and basically say something like this. You should do something with this IP address because it has been seen hosting a ransomware payload, and this specific actor is known to target our sector. Great, that IP address now finally has gone from just being another IP address on the list of IP addresses to actually being something that we should actually do something about, right? This is an actor that we've been tracking. This is an actor that we know we have maybe seen before as an organization. So this is an actual IP address that we should actually do something about. This is something that we should maybe block. So great. So when we get this IP address again, and we ask the questions, is this something we should act on? We can then start to fill out the diagram and actually say, okay, well, we know that the intent was ransomware, so it was financially motivated. We know the capabilities. Let's say this was a Reval attack as hit Bauhaus. Let's say that they use this very specific C2 framework. And then let's look at the opportunity. Okay, well, Revals, they tend to use public-facing vulnerabilities. Okay, so there we go. There was an opportunity. They were able to exploit a public-facing application. So great. So now we suddenly know from that IP address that yes, this is Reval. This is something that we should actually act on. So the reason that I go over this is, again, like I said, so that we're going to take data that we find out there. We're going to look at certain reports, and then we're going to apply our own context and apply the value that we want to apply to the data. And again, I think last week we also looked at this quote very, very quickly, but this quote is by Katie Nichols, who's a guru in the field of CTI. And she basically says the same thing around intelligence. The teams who work with intelligence, they have a superpower, right? We don't just say, go and block this. We say, go and block this because this is something that you need to be aware of. This is something that we need to take action on because of this. And so it's a really great quote, and I use it quite often in a lot of the stuff that I do. So there are quite a few ways to gather CTI, and we're not going to look at all of them. Actually, in the next session after this one, we're going to look at how you guys can generate CTI from your own incidents. So if you have incidents inside your own organization, or if you also have, I don't know, incidents at home for some reason, I don't know, maybe you're constantly under cyber attack because you're hosting some special website, I don't know, something like that. We're going to look at how you can actually take information and data about the threats that you guys are seeing directly and turn that into intelligence as well. But this week's one, this one is a little bit more about OSINT, open source intelligence. So when we look at gathering CTI, right, there are a couple of things that we can do. Of course, we can generate it from our own, we can get it from others, but we can also read. We can read the news, we can read blogs, we can read Twitter, we can read reports. And of course, it gets very overwhelming, right? Knowing which ones should we focus on, which ones should we not, and where's the intelligence out there? What's worth collecting? I said earlier, last week I was on the Abeltoft beer. This week I'm on a gin and tonics. So yeah, and the problem becomes with all this overwhelming amount of data is how do we collect it and how do we process it? And then how do we remember it, right? So if we're constantly having to disseminate all this stuff about different cyber attacks and trying to learn from them all of the time, how do we do that? How do we keep track of everything? How do we remember that this morning we read an article about this, and then this afternoon we read an article about that, and that matches up with last week's, and we need a system to be able to do it. And then we need to also bring our own context. This is the other thing that's really, really important. If you're just starting out in this, and I actually use this slide when I talked at Kia University, the business academy there, where I was going over with the students how they could start to collect CTI based on the fact that they could take this to an interview for a firm. So they could go and they could do some research into a company, and then they could gather CTI that might be relevant for that company, and then they could bring that as their own context. So basically here, this is also about deciding, what do you guys want to focus on? What's your context? Is it that you guys want to be aware of what's going on in the ransomware gang scene? Do you want to know about malware variants? Do you want to know about everything? Or do you want to know about sector-specific attacks? Or like what we're going to look at today, we're going to try and be a little bit of a jack of all trades. So we're going to try and look at a lot of different things and then tag them in specific ways so we can see relationships between them. And so what I mean here when I say bring your own context is basically, what do you think is important out there? What's interesting for you and what's interesting for your organization? And then remember what that context is, and always remember to try and bring that to the table when you're trying to gather CTI, to try and keep it relevant and keep it intelligent, basically. So what then? So, like I just said, reading articles is great, but how do you remember it all? Now, some people, they've got great ways of taking notes, and they probably use things like OneNote or Evernote or everything else like that. And that's great. Keep doing that if you think that that's awesome. But I've also found a very, very cool way of doing it. And that was taught to me by my old team lead at JN Data. And I had this problem where I just couldn't keep up with everything. And I also struggled to make everything that I was learning operational and actually then usable afterwards. And so he taught me about this concept of building a second brain, basically. So this idea that, I think I've got it on the slide here. Yeah, I have. So this idea that basically every day as humans, we consume so much information that we basically can't remember it all. And so therefore, what we could do, instead of trying to desperately remember everything, we could spend a tiny bit more time as we're processing that information. So basically, as we're actually reading about a specific attack, we could spend a few extra minutes simply indexing it into something. So those extra minutes that we spend could be massive in the future in terms of being able to pull it back up and actually look at, okay, I've gathered this CTI on this, I can actually look at it like this. And we'll look at creating our own in a second, and then we'll also look at and one that I made earlier that is just ginormous and keeps expanding every day. So the idea is basically, yeah, that you collect all sorts of different information from all sorts of different sources, and then you spend time figuring out what your context is going to be. So as you basically take all these different sources, you can see around here, paper documents, voice memos, whatever else it's going to be. For us, this is mainly replaced with blog posts or articles or DFIR reports, which are awesome, all sorts of things like that. And then when we're starting to process them through this little filter, this is when we start to apply the indexing, the metadata tagging that we actually want to use. And how are we going to do that? So the way in which we're going to do this, we are going to use an application called Obsidian. Now, you guys need to download this and install it on your machine. Now, it is available, and I'll just put the link up on the screen. Hang on. And don't worry, it's not malware or anything else like that. You can go and have a look at it. It's in the Apple Store if you want to trust that. But basically, from where you guys are, please go and download Obsidian and install it. And I will give Christian, if you pause the stream for a second or something like that, then we can give people time to actually download this and install it. I can't imagine it taking more than, I don't know, let's say 1955, maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes or so, maybe 1956. And then if we come back at 1956 to this, and then anyone's actually struggling or hasn't done it, then please speak out before we start recording again. Christian, is that okay? I guess it's okay. You can just ping me on Signal if you're still there. Great. Okay, you can just keep streaming it and then just record it out. It's a good point. Okay, so 1956 back here, and with a working version of Obsidian, and I will just put it up on the screen so you guys can see what it should look like. You should, when it first opens up and you have it installed, you should just have an option to basically create a new vault, and that's basically where you need to get to, just that point of having a new vault. And at the same time, I will just find something useful for us. And if there's anyone here who was at my Kia talk a while ago, which maybe Roland, I think you might have been, I finally also uploaded my templates for Obsidian, which you guys are going to get access to after this, which are actually quite nice. I promised that a long, long time ago, and I finally delivered it. So they'll be online as well after this talk. I'll give it one more minute, and then I'm hoping that everyone will have Obsidian, hopefully. Not a massive file to download, so it shouldn't take too long. So it is 1956, and I am going to hopefully guess that everyone has got this screen in front of them with Obsidian running. If anyone hasn't, then please speak out, because otherwise I'll move on. And if it's a disaster, then we can also there'll be the stream recorded, and you can go back to it afterwards if you have any issues as well. But I'm going to go for the fact that everyone is ready. And if there's any issues while we're doing this, then please, like I said, speak up, or maybe even just put a ping in the event channel. I'm not sure you can actually type in the event channel, but anything so that you can get my attention, and we can just quickly sort it out. But I can't imagine that it's going to be there's not going to be that much that's going to go wrong, because literally we're not doing so much apart from copying and pasting. So that's all CTI is. We just copy and paste. So anyway, let's get back into it. So now what you have in front of you is Obsidian. And what Obsidian is a very, very awesome note-taking tool that you can use to build your second brain in. It's not necessarily a second braining tool. It's just a tool for taking notes in that we can then apply this second brain strategy to. And how are we going to do that? Well, basically, the first thing that we have is everything with Obsidian starts with a vault. And a vault is basically, like a space for you to put your notes into. And we now need to start adding some notes in. Now, there's some fancy stuff that we're going to do a little bit later with some templates and some other stuff, but we'll come to that in a bit. So the first thing we're going to do is, you should see on the top left-hand side, if you can see on my screen, hopefully it's not too big for everyone, but basically there's a button here called New Note, and you should just click on that button. That will create a new note. Great. That's the first thing done. Now we're going to leave it like that. So that's it. We've got one new note, and now we've got, like, we can start typing stuff into it if we want to. We can change the title if we want to. We don't have that yet. So what we're going to do, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose to gather some intelligence on something, or we're going to choose to gather some data on something first. So let's think about something. So let's go to what could be really interesting would be to choose. Let's just check version 2, see what's on there. Here we go. Let's take this one. So what we're going to do is basically, the idea is we're going to basically say, okay, you know what, this article here, we've read this article. This is let's say this is part of our daily routine. This is a site that we check if you want to use version 2, if you're that way inclined. And you can basically, let's take this article and let's actually start to work with it. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going, and we're not going to start plagiarizing and copying everything or anything else like that, but we're going to use this as an example. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the title of the article, and we're just going to do Control C, so basically copy. And then we're going to go back to Obsidian, and we're going to take our bit at the top that says untitled. We're going to clear it out, and we're going to put in the title of the article. And then we're going to press enter. And then you're going to have your vault, which you created. And then you're going to have a note underneath, basically with the title of what the title of the article was. That's it. That's all we've done so far. That's perfect. The next thing we're going to do, because maybe at some point in the future, we're also going to want to remember part of this article. We don't need to this one is a very simple article, but there are often other articles that can contain quite a lot of text. And so maybe we just want some of the headlines. So here, all we're going to do is, let's just say we're going to copy because if we do that, we get that ad. But let's see what happens if I just do that. Give me 2 seconds. Let's just test that. Let's make sure we don't get that come through. Perfect. Okay, so if we just do a copy down to roughly, not all the article, but most of the article, just do a copy, go back to Obsidian, and then just do a paste. So cool. So now you've got your first bit of threat data, right? And this is the type of thing that gets shared a lot. And people were basically saying, they're thinking, how the hell do I use this? And what's important about this? And what's interesting about this? So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to start applying some tags to this article. We're going to start doing something with this article that can make it a bit more useful for us. So if you just go to the bottom of the article, and the way that Obsidian works with things like tagging is that we can just literally, if we just do the square brackets, so two open square brackets, and it should fill out it for us with two, basically four of them open. We can just type something in the middle of them. So the first thing I'm actually going to type is I'm going to type ransomware. Now I'm going to do it with a capital R, so please also do it with a capital R. And I'm just going to type the word ransomware, and that's it. So I'm hoping everyone is up to the same part as this, right? So we've got ransomware here. Cool. And I'm going to press enter. I'm going to go down to a new line. I'm going to do the same one again. I'm not going to type ransomware, but I'm going to write the word Denmark. And then I'm going to go down one more time. I'm going to do it again. And then is there anything else that's really, really interesting about this for me? Is that I can see here, blah, 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 ransomware. It was in Denmark. Let's put it as if it was in the, it's water, so it's not technically energy, but let's just say it's in, water, that would do. So that's basically it. So now we have taken this article from version 2 and we've basically tagged it with some things that might be interesting for us later. Now, this is really, really cheap and a really, really cheap and dirty way of doing this, right? This is when I do this properly, I do it very, very differently than this, and I use templates. And we're going to look at templates in a second and how they can work. But what I want you to see about this is that basically this is our first article. Now, what's really, really powerful with Obsidian is what we're going to do next. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go back to the internet. We're going to go back to the wider world, and we're going to go to a site that's called Bleeping Computer. This is like my almost go-to place for articles that are interesting. And we're going to look at what they're talking about. Who has been hit recently globally? Let's go and have a look. They usually have like a week in ransomware stuff that they put up. Haven't been on it for a couple of days, so just keep going. I'll find one for us and then I'll tell you which one it is. I mean, all of these are stuff we could actually use, but I just really want to find one that's like super juicy. Juicy. This week in ransomware. Okay, there's so much that is actually back here. So the week in ransomware one, there will be after analyzing cyber insurance. Who was hit? Great. Here we go. So there's an article, and you could probably find it if you just did a quick search in Google for Brazilian government discloses the attack. This link, this here on Bleeping Computer, this is awesome, and we know what we're going to use that link for this one called the Week in Ransomware, August 20th. We're going to use this page to get some more intelligence from afterwards. So this is really, really valuable. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically go into this one about the Brazilian government discloses national treasury ransomware attack, and we're going to do the same, right? So we're going to actually take the title, Control C, go back to Obsidian, create a new note, paste in the title, and there we go. Then we're going to go back to our thing. We're going to have a look at the first couple of lines, and this is interesting stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Has disclosed a ransomware attack that hit some of their computer systems. Great. Copy and paste. Well, not great for them, but great for us. We've got some cool data here. Cool. Let's see what else we've got. Anything else that was interesting about this one? Bum, 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 bum. It was in Brazil. Yes. Anything about the actual ransomware? Who was it? The threat was contained in this first stage. Government, Brazil government also first reported by 17. No, okay, so it doesn't actually tell us who. Did it tell us on their link who actually hit them? Probably in Portuguese. Yeah. Okay, doesn't matter. So we've copied and pasted a little bit of the data. We put it in here. Now what we're going to do, again, we're going to go to the bottom of our article. We're going to make some tags, and we're going to tag it again with the word ransomware. Now what you'll see is you start to type the word ransomware, is that it auto populates. So we can click on the one that's already populated. Great. Enter down. Now we're going to go for, again, we're going to come back into where was it. So here we're going to type that it was in Brazil this time. And then we're going to make a new one at the bottom. And this is basically the sector. So what we've done is basically tag the attack type, tag the country that's interesting, and then tag the sector. So in this one, there's a mix between finance and government, but I'll just call it finance just because it's interesting for there. Great. Okay, cool. Now, I'm hoping that everyone has got this far because what we're about to do next is show the power of why we are using Obsidian to do this, because maybe some of you are sitting there thinking, wow, this is like the most basic thing ever. I could have probably done this with Evernote. I could do this with Microsoft Word. Yes, you could. But what we're going to do now is really cool. So on the far left-hand side, there is a little button that says Open Graph View. If you click on Open Graph View, what you get presented with is this. It doesn't look like much, but what it is if you start dragging stuff around and playing with the really, really cool physics, what you can see is that you've got, even just with two articles, you've got a link between them, right? So there's an overlap between them of intelligence that we're gathering, right? So I've chosen that. For me, ransomware is really interesting to know about. So maybe this is my context, at least for what I'm collecting inside this vault. This is my ransomware vault. Great. So I'll start collecting information about ransomware. So I could see that things like ransomware, I've got this one, I've got this one, I've got the countries that it's here. So if I also then, as you can imagine, if I keep collecting more and more and more and more and more articles throughout what I'm doing, more and more stuff gets populated and more links get drawn between them. So if I bring more context to this and I add in more tags and I want to know more and more context about the data that I'm collecting, all of a sudden these things would be greater, right? So we have far more things that we could actually look at. Now, we're going to add a couple more into our vault, and then we're going to do a couple of things with some searches and some filtering. That's going to be cool. So if we go back and then say we want to add a new node, so we go and add a new node. Now, I hope I'm not moving too fast for anyone, but if we go back to that page that was the week in ransomware page, and if we look for another one, right, so we can see that there was also a hit on this Japanese insurer called Tokyo Marine. So if we take Tokyo Marine, and once again, we're going to copy the title, we're going to go to Obsidian, we're going to paste in the title like that. We're going to come down here. We're going to look at a couple of the things. So if we even just copy the first ones up to this point and paste them in. Grand. Now, some of you will have a look. Some of you will notice that actually inside the articles, they also mention some of the words that we want to tag. Now, what some people do when they use this tool to do CTI is they actually just, instead of adding more words into the articles, they just go and tag the words that already exist in the article instead. Now, that's a way that you could do it. If you were using automation, maybe you could do it that way. But I just like to do it at the bottom, and I have some templates that we're going to add in a bit to give you a little bit more insight into how we do this on scale to make them a bit tidier. But right now, the way we're going to do it is like this. So we're going to, again, tag with ransomware. This time, the country was Japan. And we're going to add the fact that, again, it was finance, right? It was insurance, so it was finance. Grand. Cool. So once we've done that one, then we go back to our graph. And then you should see that the graph starts to get a bit more joined together, right? So whereas before we only had one thing that was linked, now we've got a link between both ransomware and finance, right? So these are actually linked as well, which is really, really cool. Then there are a number of other things that we can do. So right now, this is actually quite basic and quite simple. But the funny thing is that when we actually get to the point of then having tons of data in here, right, it becomes far more difficult to see everything, right? Because this will just be one massive blob. Now, one of the ways that we can do that is if you look inside the graph view section, you'll also have this little box in the top left where you can drop down some of these, and it allows you to do some things with the actual graph that's been drawn. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can search. So you could basically do a quick search for finance. I think it's like that. And then it will just remove everything that doesn't conform to finance, right? So we could also do something like, I think if we type 9, yeah, you can also do it with that line, semicolon, finance. And we can do things like that, where we can then filter out and look specifically at text in finance. We can also do the same by doing it with typing ransomware as well, where actually all of our articles right now contain ransomware, so therefore it hasn't filtered anything out. Again, we can also do some really cool stuff where we can actually also make some groups where we can basically go in here and we can create a query where we want to color in specific relationships in a specific color. So we could basically say, okay, so whenever the line for finance comes up, I would like that group to be red, right? So whenever there's an article that mentions the word finance, and notice that it didn't color the word finance because the word finance was just a tag, but because these have got the word finance in them, because I put it in them at the tag, all of a sudden they light up red. So can you imagine if you are like I am working at a company that is doing a lot of CTI stuff, it's really, really valuable to have a massive database of data like this to some degree that you can very quickly see relationships between. So you can go in and see how much stuff do I have about ransomware in specific sectors. This is just really, really powerful, and actually I think it's really, really awesome actually. And then you can imagine that you add tons of different stuff in, right? We can add line, and we can have stuff about if an attack is also in Denmark, because maybe you're tracking global stuff, but you also want to know about stuff that's going on inside Denmark. So there you go. See, we got different colors, we got different cool stuff going on in here. That's kind of the gist of what we're doing here, right? And remember that this has got to, there's no point just collecting this for the sake of it, right? Because ultimately, if you don't have any reason to collect this, so if you're sitting there thinking I can't actually use this, then you haven't found the right context, right? So if you actually would like to figure out how you can do it, then you need to figure out, well, what context do I need to bring to this? What sort of article should I be collecting on? Maybe I'm collecting about the complete wrong stuff. Maybe I shouldn't be collecting about ransomware. Maybe I should be collecting about other types of cyber attacks. I actually lost however many other ones there are because my mind is always on ransomware, but other types of cyber attacks where they're also important to keep track of. You could also do that. So there's tons and tons of possibilities with this tool, and what we've done so far is only collect based on a few. Now, what we're also going to do is look at a couple of ways in which we can also make life easier for ourselves in this tool. Now, one of the ways that we can do that is, let me just see, settings, and I just need to remember where the thing is actually. Where are you? Okay, I'm actually lost. Where are my templates gone? Hang on a second. What is going on here? Oh, on earth have I lost my templates? Let me see if I do Control T. I have lost my templates. 2 seconds, guys. This is actually a bit of a demo god issue. Ah, there. That's why. Cool. Okay. So in Obsidian, what you need to do, what you can do, is that under settings there is a way of adding templates in, and templates are ways of making your life much easier in terms of bringing in things like metadata that's valuable to be tagging. Now, the way in which you enable them is if you actually go to the bottom left and look at this little cog for settings, and then click on it. And then you've got this section for core plugins in the side. And if you scroll down, you find the word templates, basically saying insert template content from folder of template files. And then you just toggle this to on. And then on the left-hand side, you should see in this box comes up here with templates. So that's basically it. And then you need to point it at what folder are your templates stored in. And then we are going to need to do some funky stuff. And instead of doing it that way, we can start saving templates in there. What we're going to do is we're going to cheat a tiny bit so I can show you guys how to use them without going through the hassle of installing them. If you go to I don't know if I can get this in the chat, but basically at Computech we have a GitHub, and inside our Computech Stri DK GitHub, if you actually look here for github.com/Computech Stri DK, there's a repository called public. Inside that repository, when you go into the public repository, you will find that there's a presentation. So the presentations from last time are in there. There's some stuff from some work we did about Wizard Spider, but then there's a folder called Obsidian/templates. And if you go in there, there's a whole lot of templates that are meant to be used for different reasons. Now, since we're working a lot with news articles, if you just click on the one that says template for news article, you can actually see that we get some markdown, because basically that's all that that Obsidian actually is. So if we actually take the raw version of this, so as you can see, for those who haven't done this before, if you go to into this folder on the Computech Stri DK/public and go in and click on the one for news news article, you can see that then we get this the markdown here, and then if you click on raw, you can then get you can then just copy and paste it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy. Right, sorry, my dad's just getting eyes behind me. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to go back to a new article inside Obsidian, and I'm just going to paste that in. So then I've got that, and those are basically the metadata that I would like to collect as I'm going through and I'm working with my collecting my different posts and everything else like that. Now, what you can see here is that basically these are basically just ways of applying data to or context to the article that I'm consuming. So what do they mean? Now, I'm going to skip these top ones because they're not important right now, and I don't want to go into too much of them, but basically, on the metadata side, what we can do is if we go in now and choose a new article, it can be any article, right? So you guys choose anything that you want. What I'm going to choose is this one here, Hive ransomware from Bleeping Computer around the Memorial Health System. You guys choose whichever one you want. You don't have to choose the same one. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to put it in the title. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the actual title, not the URL. And I'm going to paste it in the box like that. I'm going to press enter. Great. Now, as you can see, I've got these metadata sections, right? So I can actually go in and I can take out the word title in the middle here, and I'll just put the actual title in. Grand. So I got the title of the article in there. Then what I've got here is I've got a type. Now, whenever if you can imagine, I have some templates that every time that I actually put them in, I add this metadata to each article. And I'm going to show you a finished version after so you can see it. But this is a way of putting it up in a really in the graph and actually seeing how many articles do I have of specific types. So I can filter down to news articles, right? So this is just tagging, adding different tags in. Now you'll see that there's also this little bomber sign here, and usually that's because what we do is we add that sign before the title. It's not important for you guys to know anything about that, but the point is it just gives you this type news. So let's just ignore this bomber, but basically the type news. And we can come in here and then we can basically add in things like what news provider have we collected from? Because maybe we have like a very, very select few of news providers that we think are valuable, or maybe we collect about a lot. And what we actually want to do is we want to learn which news providers are we actually getting most of our intelligence from. So in this regard, it's bleeping computer. So I'll just come in and I'll just make a new tag for bleeping computer. That's it. Now, from then on, every article that I've got from them, I can actually go in and add this, and we'll do that afterwards. For reference, now, one of the things that you'll notice that I didn't do when we were doing the articles earlier was that I actually didn't put any links in. So I couldn't go back to those articles afterwards at having to search for the title. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL, and I'm going to put the URL in the reference section. So then when I come back to this article in the future and I think, oh, you know what, this was actually really interesting, I need to do something about this, suddenly I've actually got it available to me. Another really great thing to do here is to actually look at what date was this actually published in. We can choose the granularity that we want to do this, but what I tend to do is do things like the month and the year. So if we do something like, let's say, let's go and look at this article. It was published in August 16th. So we could basically do 08 2021. And then we can do some sorting, and we can do other stuff that we can actually then only look at articles, for example, from specific months. We can look at only articles from 2021. There's all sorts of other stuff that we can do if that's important for us. We could even change this to having separate things where we do August 2021. There's all sorts of ways of doing it. Now, review date, this could be because now there's a way of using Obsidian that multiple people can also have access to the same vault. So this could be like a database of intelligence that we're using. And I have done it in this way with my old team needed JN data, where we had a mutual vault that we shared, where we basically put loads of stuff in there and then marked them in a specific color and said these need reviewing later. So that basically we could also do a quick when was this information actually reviewed? Because maybe we find something that was really, really interesting from 2 years or so ago that we want to put in there that was published 2 years ago, but we still want it to be there at our fingertips if we want to search for it. So therefore, we might want to add a review date of recently. So we'll also do that. We'll put in 08 2021. And then we can do some more stuff. We can add more metadata in and everything else. And then we can, again, add the title in here. And then now you'll notice that we've actually tried to kind of add a little bit more context into the actual article itself as well, right? So basically trying to get an understanding of, well, what happened and then how did it also happen, so that we can actually then try and come back in and learn a little bit about this. So I'll go back into my article and I'll look for how can I get an understanding of, well, what happened? Because a lot of these articles are actually written in that way, where they first talk about what's happened and they talk about how that actually happened. So the first thing we're going to do again is we'll look at the top and see, okay, blah 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 blah, Hive ransomware attack. The attack happened and detected it once they noticed it. Okay, so that's basically what happened. The first bit there is what happened. Cool. So I'll go in there and I'll add that under what happened. And I'll go back into the article and I'll look at how did it actually happen. The attack caused disruptions on Sunday. After learning more about it, issued a press statement. They haven't really said anything inside here, apart from typically ransomware attacks do this. And they haven't really written anything about how it happened. So what I would then tend to do is basically look at this and see what else can I learn. Here we go. Bleeping computers seen evidence that the attackers have stolen databases. Okay, so this is really interesting to know about. And here. So why am I doing this? Now, there's something really important coming up in a minute. I'm going to show you guys that's really valuable that we can also do. So then I've got a section at the end for tagging if I want to. So we can, there's a few other things in here that we're not going to go into, but basically now at the end, I can come in and I can apply the same things that I did earlier, where I'll tag my article as ransomware. Great. Now, what am I going to do? Now I'm going to do something where I'm also going to tag it as with the ransomware variant, right? So I'm going to call it Hive. Because then I can come back into this later and then we can look at all sorts of different instances of Hive ransomware, right? Space, then I'm going to tag, where was it? It was Memorial Health. Let's have a look. Where is this? This is in the US. Yes, in the US. So US. And in the sector, it was healthcare. Awesome. So now we've got another article that we've tagged, and we've tagged it using my system of doing the tagging. So we can go back in and we can look at different things like publish data, put the wrong thing there, clean that up, and use the templates for all sorts of different stuff. Now that's another article we've done. Again, we can go back into our graph and we can actually look at others. Now we've got this new one that's come in. When we've got this new tag for news. So I could go in and I could go back in and I could tag all my other articles with the same thing, and I can add more metadata and more context into the data that I'm actually collecting. That's cool. But I guess you guys are sitting there thinking, okay, this is great, but this is going to take quite a long time and blah blah blah. Yes, that's actually very, very true. However, what I can show you guys is one I made earlier. Just give me a second. Yeah, okay. So here is one that I made earlier and one that is actually active on GitHub, but isn't open on GitHub. This is one that we spent some time building up. It's not perfect. There's still loads missing because we started it and then we used it as like a really interesting demo afterwards. But this is what you can get if you carry on down the path of using this to gather your CTI. And as I said, context is king, right? So remembering to bring that intelligence into what you're doing, that's the actual king in this area, right? So if we go in and actually open the graph view for what I've created here, okay, we've got quite a lot, right? So we've actually created quite a big web of stuff and different articles, and we can zoom in and we can see this is probably ransomware. Yep. And I can click on that and I can go in and I can see what I've done is I've tried to organize it in a very specific way. So actually on the ransomware page, so the more and more that I get, I've actually created an actual page for ransomware where I've then added some subtags. Now this is really cool because actually what gets really interesting after a little while is that the more and more that I collect, the more and more things that I try and bring in. So with me being focused quite heavily on detection engineering as well, what I could do is I could actually look at how many of the articles I've collected have the word detection in them, where I actually can see that there maybe is some detection opportunities present in some of these articles. So I'll look at this one I'll choose Revil. Cool, I've got some information about Revil here. And if I go to the end, I know that inside this article, I could probably expect to find some ways of doing some detection, some really interesting information about Revil and how they're working. Some attacks that they've done, all sorts of stuff, right? So if you can imagine that me as a CTI guy wanting to keep up to date on everything that's going on, this is a really, really valuable way of doing it because I basically have collected this data and then I've kept up to speed with it and kept it up to date as much as possible. And then I come in and I can see, okay, this is Revil. What ways do I have of doing detections? If I go back to my graph and again look at some of these, I also have a page that's called detection opportunities, where I can also see which articles I've collected information on and which different malware families and ransomware variants and threat actors do I actually have this stuff collected on. Now, this is really, really valuable. Now, again, this is also going from that thing of saying, okay, cool, you know what, there was this this detection report. And what we're going to do, we'll do one more together. So we'll go back to our Obsidian, and now instead of collecting information about actual attacks that's going on, because you can imagine if we sat here, we could spend hours doing it. We could go into Bleeping Computer, we could find out loads more about weakened ransomware. We could collect tons because this site is just full of really, really great stuff. Yeah, we could keep doing that for quite a long time. But I really want to show you guys other things that we can actually do. So there's a really great site, if any of you haven't seen it already, called DFIR report. If we go to DFIR report, so DFIR report, search in Google for that, you'll see a really, really great resource with basically tons and tons of cool stuff on it. Now, again, this is always about, instead of being overwhelmed with all of this stuff and be like, oh my God, how am I going to know? How am I going to learn all this stuff? Well, you could come in and basically say, look, what I'm really interested in focusing on Wizard Spider, threat actor Wizard Spider. Now, for those who don't know very much about Wizard Spider is behind things like TrickBot, Conti, ransomware, used to be also Ryuk. So we can actually say, okay, we want to focus on the stuff that Wizard Spider is doing. And if we know that Wizard Spider is working with TrickBot, so we know that this article here could be really interesting for us. So if we go in, great. So we'll take this article on the DFIR report site here. We'll click into this article. We'll take the title again. We'll go into Obsidian. We'll make a new note. We'll give it that title. We won't use a template. The templates are just to show you what you could do if you wanted to. And now we're going to go back to the DFIR report, and we're just going to copy the intro. We're not going to copy any more than that because we don't need to take any more of it. And we'll paste the intro in. Then we'll make some new tags at the bottom. And now this is a completely different thing, right? This is not a news article where we can say this was about a country or this was about anything specific. What we do have is we know that this is about TrickBot. So we'll add the word TrickBot. And what else we know that's also on this page is the mention of the word Ryuk, because we can see Ryuk here. And we'll also add Conti again, because I know it's already on the screen, but we'll add an actual proper tag for Conti. Now we can also see Cobalt Strike being mentioned, so we'll add Cobalt Strike. And then we know from looking at this site and actually reading through it, we've got a lot of really good information about TrickBot and how it's actually being utilized, how it's being used to trick people into clicking on stuff. So if we scroll down, we've got some stuff around some really interesting stuff that we can learn from this, right? So we've got some things around where we can even go in and start tagging MITRE. We could go to really nth degree with this, where we could tag all sorts of really crazy stuff. We're not going to. I mean, you can also add pictures into oh, I went really far in there. You can also add pictures into Obsidian if you really want to. But there's some really great stuff around this. There's also some great stuff around doing detections, right? We can see that they use PowerShell. We can see that they do specific ways of doing PowerShell. Some really interesting stuff to have a look for in your own environment. Good, really valuable stuff here for threat hunting, right? So looking for stuff like this. So now we know that this article is super valuable for us. We can come in and we can basically, again, add some new tags to it, right? So if we know what could this article be useful for in the future, this article could be useful for doing some threat hunting, right? It could also be useful for doing detections, some detection work. So if we just add those to our article, grand. So if we go back in and then we choose another one, right? Let's choose something around Conti ransomware, which is again Wizard Spider behind the scenes, to be honest. But let's choose this one as well. So if we choose this page called Conti, go back into Obsidian, add a new thing, copy and paste in Conti ransomware, go back to the page, take the introduction again, paste it in. And actually, one thing we forgot to do in the previous one was take the URL. So we'll also just copy and paste the URL. We'll go back to Obsidian. We'll paste it in at the end. And then we're going to go back into our tagging and we're going to do some stuff we did before, right? So we're going to add in the word Conti because we know that we've seen Conti in here. Now we've got some more stuff, right? We've got iced ID because that's what all the cool kids are using nowadays to get their initial access. Great. What else do we have mentioned on the page? We've got Conti, we've got ransomware. Again, we could also come in and actually tag ransomware if we wanted to, just to make sure we've got it on here. And then there's all sorts of other stuff, right? If we really wanted to go down to that level, we could also do some more tagging for RDP, PS exec, Cobalt Strike. Let's tag Cobalt Strike just so we got that in there for shits and giggles. Again, this page is really valuable for threat hunting. Cool, we'll tag it with threat hunting, and it's also really valuable for detections. So now, as you can see, for those of you who are sitting there like, I don't really care about what he's just done earlier about this whole collecting information just about attacks for the sake of collecting it for attacks. Okay, don't do that then. Collect it for the sake of operationalizing it, right? We talked earlier about how do we turn the stuff from data into actual intelligence. Well, here's another way of actually operationalizing some data that's out there on the DFIR report that actually maybe you had never seen before. And now today you know it's here, and then you can actually start collecting this information and knowing, building up a repertoire or a database of this is where I can go to do some more cool threat hunting. Great, because there's tons of great stuff in here. Awesome. Good, because tons of threat hunting queries you could run inside your environment. Cool. Do that. Now what we can do is we can go back to our graph view. Now we've maybe still got some of our graphs from earlier. Okay, perfect. But we could also do something like go to the filters and just type in the word detection. And now we can see that we've actually got one page where we've got some stuff, detections about Conti. We can also see we've maybe got a way of doing some detections of Cobalt Strike. We've got it in 2 places here. So if I was to just come in and clear out my groups and actually choose that one of my groups should now be based on detections instead. So I can see all the articles where I know I can do detection. Okay, cool. Let's clear that out. Now you can see that these are my articles, or this is my intelligence that I've collected where I've actually got the opportunity to do detections. So I can see, okay, cool. I can do some stuff with, if I highlight that one, I can see, cool, I've got something here where I can go in, I can actually look at it and I can go straight through and see this is about Conti. I've got iced ID mentioned on here. I've got this link here. Okay, what was that again? Let's go have a look at it quickly. Okay, it's loaded up in Edge, fantastic. But cool, I've got this. Now I can actually start, and those of you out there that are seeing, thinking, I really want to start doing some threat hunting. Here's the perfect way of doing it, right? Choose some DFIR reports and just get going. But again, this is also about, like I said before, bringing your context, understanding what is it that you want to actually collect intelligence on, what is it you want to collect data on, and then what do you want to add onto it to actually turn it into intelligence. So is there anything else that's super interesting about what I have inside here? I don't think so, actually. Let's have a look. Nope. So actually, I think hopefully, if everyone actually kept up the speed of all of that today's session we can actually end a little bit earlier than fully planned, because actually we've covered most of it. And if I keep talking about it, I'm going to be basically spoon feeding you guys with how to do note taking. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I think, unless I have any more on here, do I? Have a look. Yeah, what can you do now? Cool. Yeah, last slide. You guys can download Obsidian as you already have done. Bring your own context, bring your own thing that you want to actually collect intelligence on, and stuff you want to turn from data into actual intelligence. Find some good resources. This is also actually one of the most important things about doing this, right? Is not just go out and be like, every single resource possible, I need to collect everything, I need to do everything, because you'll fail and you'll actually find very quickly that even sites that are really, really good, like Zero Day Net or ZDNet and Bleeping Computer, they also have overlapping articles. So let's give an example here of where this can actually go wrong. It can go wrong in if you are collecting intelligence about ransomware attacks and you're collecting and you want to count how many attacks has there been as an example, in Denmark, and you are collecting from both Computer World and from version 2, but if you keep collecting them and they both start talking about a water treatment plant that gets hit, are you also remembering to count them as one? Are you actually putting them both into the same note, or are you going to have two separate ones? There, if you're counting stuff like that, it can go drastically wrong because you've collected double intelligence, right? So it doesn't become any more intelligent just because you've got two of them. So there's things like that you've got to be really careful of. So my recommendation there is to choose a very few good resources that you trust. Some good blogs. FireEye's blog is really good as an example. DFIR report is also really great. Red Canary is awesome. And then stick to those, right? And then work from there. Like I mostly stick to things like Bleeping Computer, ZDayNet, and then a few of the other groups that I mentioned. And then I follow quite a lot of different people on Twitter, because Twitter is also a creatively valuable place to keep up to speed with what's actually going on. I actually think it's probably the number one place to keep up to speed with everything that's actually happening out there. And then, of course, from there, you can then go into all the different stuff that's being released and all the different people that are releasing stuff. But Twitter is pretty damn great. And then follow a select few people and build up a kind of some trusted resources that you know. These are blogs that I trust and that have good intelligence. These are Twitter people that I should follow that have good stuff, and then go from there and then build out from there, right? And then if you find a gap, that gap you can then fill with your own stuff. And this is something, actually, maybe I can just add this in before we end this, because I've got a tiny bit of time left if everyone's interested in hearing it. But what we did recently was exactly that. If we look at Conti specifically, the guys with the spider behind all of this, funny story, but one of the guys from Conti, he got really tired of being part of the ransomware gang. I don't know why. Maybe he wasn't being paid enough. Who knows? But he got so tired that what he did was he actually leaked a whole load of text files and manuals about how the operators behind the Conti ransomware, how they actually are working. And this was incredible, because as you can imagine, what we normally see as CTI guys or CTI girls, CTI people, is we see what happens in incidents, right? So we don't get full visibility into everything that they have in their repertoire. We see only what is actually core. So we don't see everything that actually goes on. So this was a really like amazing thing that happened, because getting to see like the actual manuals, the actual documents of how they are using the different tools like Cobalt Strike and all sorts of other really crazy tools, how they're using them, right down to the thing of how they're naming specific things and how they're talking about it. And this was a really awesome thing that happened. So this leak that came out, it was leaked and it came out in Russian. And it came out, I think, towards the beginning of August. And it was really powerful, because it actually showed a lot of the stuff that was going on. Now, if you actually go and look up someone like Wizard Spider and see it on the MITRE Attack page as an example. So the guys at MITRE, under MITRE Attack, they also try and track a number of the threat groups, quite a large amount of threat groups that they keep a track of. This is also a really good resource, guys, by the way, for collecting intelligence from and actually putting into your Obsidian. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff in here that might be valuable for later. Don't go in and just start scraping everything and be like, I need all of this. The stuff that's relevant, do it. But as you can see here, this is as of the end of December. There's a lot of stuff that's actually new that they're doing that hasn't been put in here. So people don't actually have fully up-to-date intelligence about everything about Wizard Spider, which is the guys behind Conti. So what we did last week was we actually spent quite a lot of time researching the leaks and translating them, and actually getting some really dodgy translations from Google Translate, and then we found some actual proper translations of everything. And so the site that you guys were just on, the GitHub page for Computech, we've also actually released a massive amount of stuff about the leaks. So there's a really interesting page here. If you guys haven't seen it, you can go to it from the Computech page, where you can actually have a look at the actual leaks and see the different notepad files and everything else that were leaked, and you can actually see how they do a lot of stuff. It's really, really interesting read, really, really fun to also see how they write to each other, and all sorts of really interesting stuff. Also to learn about the different types of tooling they're using, also to see that they're just humans behind the scene. Like a lot of the time we tend to put attackers on a pedestal, and imagine that they are some sort of superior people because they managed to do what they were doing. Really not. When you actually read a lot of the manuals, they're just people like we are. And so we took a lot of this information from the leaks, and we have mapped it up against MITRE ATT&CK. And the cool thing with MITRE ATT&CK, if anyone has seen this before, I'm not sure, but there's this thing called the attack navigator. So we talked last week a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK, I think, where we looked at different things, and we'll talk a bit more about it on the future session if anyone's interested in also talking about intrusion analysis and how we actually do that. But there's a MITRE ATT&CK navigator now. I can't actually remember where the freaking hell it is. Maybe we just go MITRE ATT&CK navigator like that instead. And then from Google, we can go into the attack navigator. So basically, you can actually, if you wanted to, you can actually come in and create your own mapping of an incident you've seen, or you can also go in and you can actually add in known threat actor groups, right? You can select them and see what different things they show up, and look at different colors and all sort of cool stuff like that. But the thing is that, again, like I said, the stuff that was released based on Wizard Spider right now was quite only up until December. So we have gone in and we have taken all the stuff from the leaks, and we have mapped it into our own, we've mapped it into MITRE's language for the navigator. So you can actually go in and actually see, there's also an image file of it, which we can have a look at if that loads, of the most recent mapping, and see, okay, how is it the Wizard Spider actually doing stuff? There's also quite a lot of really interesting stuff underneath inside here, notes around how they actually do stuff. The wording that they use is really, really interesting. There's some really cool stuff in there. So sorry, I got really, really sidetracked and it was at the end, but basically go have a look there. There's some free intelligence there. And this is that thing that I talked about at the beginning around giving stuff away, because this is really, really important to give back to the community, I think. So there's some stuff here about Wizard Spider that could be really interesting for you guys as well. And how could you use this? Again, like I said, you could take this information, and then you could map it into your own Obsidian. You can add the context that you want to add to it, and you could basically say, they use the following MITRE segments. This is how I might defend against that. Voila. So if we go back to the final slide again, here, like I said, find your resources, decide on the context, get the tooling, get indexing, and that was that. So thank you everyone for joining again. That was another fun session. I hope that everyone kept up with it. I'm sorry if I went a bit too fast in some places, but the video is recorded and will be online, I think, quite shortly after this is finished, once we've cut it out and edited it. And next time's session, guys, will be in 2 weeks today, and it will be focusing on a really, really cool subject, which is about how to create your own threat intelligence from your own organization's data. So that one is going to be even more exciting than this Obsidian one, hopefully, where we're actually going to take an actual incident. We could choose a Cannonball water treatment plant, I don't really care. Take that one and look at how do we then map it into a language. And we'll probably use Obsidian to also help us do the mapping. But look at then how can we then learn stuff from that, and build metrics, and look at all sorts of interesting stuff like fancy graphs and stuff like that. But that's for next time. There's a lot of data science, but it should be super fun. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, if there's any questions, please speak up, and we can cut them out of the stream afterwards. And if anyone wants to ask anything, go ahead. And last time, I think a lot of people used the chat channel in the main channel to ask the questions. So if you guys want to ask anything, I'll hang around there for a bit, and then just write to me if you want to. I'm available. So